Good morning, America. Hubert Johnson here with Taxes Made Easy. Thank you again for watching. And we've got an interesting show, a lot of news out today. A lot of news regarding anti-competitive pricing from China and what the Biden administration is doing to fight it. And they are stepping up, which I think is a good thing. I'm surprised they haven't done it sooner, but glad that they're doing it now. Um, One of the concerns here, and what we're going to focus on today, though, is on the macro level savings versus spending or consumption. So, want to really talk about the value of saving, how it helps not only individuals but how it helps the economy at large, and unfortunately how our government disincentivizes savings through rescuing people, bailouts, printing more money, and actually does our economy a great disservice by doing so. And we'll be right back after this break. Welcome back, everybody. We have a lot of great news to cover. Well, interesting news, I think. And so we're just going to take a deep dive into it. The first article here is from townhall.com. And it's pretty straightforward. Gavin Newsome, governor of California, has banned all plastic grocery shopping bags. So 10 years ago, they banned the little thin plastic bags that everybody's used to and familiar with. So then they went to the much thicker grocery bags that were quote unquote reusable. But now they'll no longer be able to be offered plastic bags at all. And they had to pay, if you didn't have your own bags, you had to pay a fee and pay for each plastic bag for the thicker ones. But now the thicker ones are being banned too. Why? Because they're just as bad for the environment. And they don't tend to get reused as much, even though they were charging 10 cents a bag or something like that. Plastic bags create pollution in our environment and break into microplastics that contaminate drinking water and threaten our health. They're right. If they get into the environment, they don't end up in landfills, it's a bad thing. So they're saying after 10 years, they clearly needed to tighten things up. And so now there's no more plastic bags in grocery checkout lanes. There's paper. So, a dozen states currently have some kind of plastic bag ban in place. So moving forward, there will only be paper available in California. And again, it talks about some of the other states. But ironically, plastic bag consumption has skyrocketed. And well, New Jersey going from 53 million pounds of plastic to 150 million pounds since. Why? Because the alternative bags that are supposed to be reusable don't get used nearly as much as they should, and they have 3 times the plastic consumption for bags. So, and most of the reusable bags were not widely recycled, and I'm sure California saw the same thing. So again, good or bad, it's probably good for the environment to get rid of plastic bags altogether. And so right now people are going to be stuck using paper bags. We'll see how that goes. And that's something Californians will have to deal with. I'd actually prefer paper, but if they're charging for each one, I might not. Every time I go to California, I get reminded of that. This is an interesting article. Blackstone sells Motel 6 for $525 million. And why do we care? To be honest, I consider not even bringing up this article, but I think we should care because the reason Blackstone is paying for it. So back in 2019, Blackstone acquired Motel 6 and Studio 6 hotel brands for $1.9 billion. Now they're selling for almost a quarter of that, $525 million. Why would they do that? Well, because what's happening post-COVID, and especially currently with inflation, people aren't going to motels on hotels. So they have 1,500 locations. Um, it's generated 1.7 billion in gross revenues for them. So, and it said this is a terrific outcome for our investors. We made money, tripled our investors' capital, and generated over a billion profit over the whole period. So they're arguing, look, it was profitable for them, but now time to move on. Why? Hotel industry is facing challenges due to rising cost of living. People don't have the same money to travel, and there's a projected decline in hotel occupancy rates for the year and probably moving forward because even though the Fed cut rates, inflation is still going to be around for quite some time. Why? Because they keep printing money. So moving forward to the next one, another, you could say, issue with our economy, college campuses are closing. And one thing that kind of made me scratch my head is the College of Notre Dame is one of them. Now, I had to look this up. I'm like, it's not Notre Dame that we're all familiar with. And it's not. It's a separate college. The University of Notre Dame is still alive and well. But almost 100 college campuses closed over the past year. Clark, Cabrini, the University of Arts, Birmingham Southern College, all closing down in 2024. Why? Students just aren't going to college as much. And even though they're charging more money, a lot of them just can't get by. So a lot of the smaller, more local colleges are coming up short. So 70% of private college students, when their colleges close down, receive no help whatsoever. Of the 500,000 students displaced by closures, less than half re-enrolled elsewhere. So again, this Notre Dame College, which again, very different. This is in South Euclid, Ohio, not Notre Dame University, also closed down. And so it's a concern here. But enrollment is still down. It says there are 2 million unfilled student slots across U.S. colleges and universities. Why? Well, you have a sustained period of decreased birth rates. So again, we don't have as many young people as we used to. Ironically, we have a larger population, but we have fewer people of college age that are ready to go to college. So you had a delayed FOSFA rollout, which affected student loans. But again, overall enrollment has decreased by 1 million across the board. So hopefully this is limited and doesn't spread. Most of this is in the Northeast, where a lot of these colleges have closed, but you see some throughout the South as well. Now, this next article, also from the Epoch Times, this is an interesting article. So we have talked about Telegram CEO Durov, who this is like the 10th largest social media company in the world, and it's very big in Eastern Europe. Ukraine has used it for their resistance against Russia, and so the founder, Pavel Durov, flies into France and they arrest him. Why? Because they're claiming that they're trying to tackle cybercrime and that there are crimes happening on child trafficking, drug trafficking, etc. Communications happening through his social media platform. This happens to some extent on all social media platforms, but the French government had demanded access and information, and he refused. He said that's one of the benefits, that it doesn't have government censorship and control of his platform. So the new French government, far left liberals have taken over, and they're being very aggressive. And this is a huge concern. So here he has his private jet, landed in France, can't leave. He bonded out, so he's living in France but can't leave the country, and they could force him to wait 10 years per French lawyer with expert experience in these state security cases. So he can be stuck in France for 10 years just to have a trial. So he claims that the government's just trying to get information from him, doesn't really want to put on trial, but they have plenty of time to force him to sit in the country and not allow him out. So, again, of course, there's always someone else that disagrees. Interesting, though, this isn't the first time this has happened. So in 2021, Herdman, a Canadian national, was extradited, charged with 22 offenses relating to this. And he's been sitting in Paris in prison for 3 years and still doesn't have a trial date. So no right to a speedy trial. You don't have a lot of the rights that we take for granted here in the United States. And the main attorney, Marianne, here, that they're quoting, said, look, it could take even a longer wait for trial in Durov's case. And she said, when someone's in jail, it should be set more quickly, but in the case of Herdman, hasn't happened. So kind of scary. You have larger governments in Brazil. They're going after Elon Musk, and I'm sure he is not flying to Brazil. He's not flying to France anytime. There are countries that are supposedly democratic, open countries that are now grabbing people, throwing them in jail, or refusing to let them leave the country for years, pending trials, or slapping them with huge fines. It's kind of scary that the West is going after information. Are there ways to cooperate and pursue criminal activities online? Yes, but is that really why they're doing it? So, again, interesting article. Hopefully things, again, we'll see how this shakes out. But he could be sitting there for years, just waiting for trial in France. So next article, this kind of ties into a couple articles, and I have enough time to introduce this, but not really get into it. Just want to check the time we have. I have 7:16. So this next article is the Biden administration being encouraged to use their power here because we have a possible strike that could affect a huge portion of the country here. And we are out of time, and we'll be right back after this next break. Welcome back, everybody. And just going to dive into this next article from the Washington Examiner. And there's two articles, well, a few about what the Biden administration is doing. And this is Bill Cassidy, senator from Louisiana, is calling on the Biden administration to do something to stop a strike that's going to affect 40% of all imports, exports, port activity, pretty much from Maine to the Gulf Coast. So it could result in 25,000 dock workers walking off the job. Could snarl supply chains. If you thought we had supply chain issues before, a huge strike, pretty much shutting down the East and Gulf Coast, East Coast and Gulf Coast. You can just imagine how that could be a problem. And this covers ports between Maine and Texas. So pretty much the entire east and southern coast of the United States, including New York, New Orleans, and Savannah, Georgia. So some of the biggest ports in the world could be shut down by this strike. And of course, Bill Cassidy isn't pulling any punches. accusing Biden and Harris to be more pro-union than pro-worker. He's saying we need to do something here to stop the strike. Under the Taft-Hartley Act, they can do an 80-day cooling off period. However, the Biden administration has said that they won't use that. So, just had it right here. So in Reuters last week, they quoted Biden administration official that the president would not, in fact, invoke the Taft-Hartley Act to break the port strike. So whether that's good or bad, let's see what happens if they can come to some kind of last-minute deal. But be aware, in the next week, this could have a huge impact on getting goods to the American people. And it could really have a huge impact throughout the economy if we shut down, if you can just imagine, the entire East Coast and Southern Coast. And this has been brewing for a while, but again, we have 1 week before we can actually, before the strike is supposed to start. Next article goes along these lines. Stellantis, which is Chrysler, GM, denies failing to honor commitments to the UAW, so United Auto Workers. They're having, they're facing a strike as well. So Boeing is facing a strike. The dock workers are threatening to strike in a week. And again, the UAW is threatening to strike on Stellantis. And so, again, they're preparing for an they had an unprecedented strike a year ago, and then they got an agreement in 2023, and now their UAW is accusing the Stellantis of not honoring that agreement. So, accusing them of breaking their contract promises. The big issue here, investment commitments, and again, a planned multi-billion-dollar investment into a new battery plant in Belvidere, Illinois, that's supposed to be all union. And also Stellantis plans to move the Dodge Durango SUV out of the U.S. Why would they move a whole plant out of the U.S. for production? Because it's too expensive here. Again, inflation is really hurting international companies like them. And again, it's demand has been a big issue here as well. And so that's one of the big criticisms, is that consumers and workers have argued the company has not done enough to invigorate demand. So people are buying more of the product. But it looks like Chrysler and Stellantis, being owned by Chrysler, is having, there's quite a few issues out there. And we're going to jump to why some of the things facing and really undercutting U.S. car manufacturers. So going with this same theme, the Biden administration just came up with a couple more bans targeting Chinese goods and vehicles. So last week they proposed a tariff 100% on Chinese EVs. Now people have been raising this issue. A ban on Chinese vehicle software and hardware. Why? Because we can't trust the Chinese government, the communist government of China, as far as we can throw them. And we shouldn't even trust them that far. So on September 20th, yesterday, they proposed a ban from countries of concern for vehicle technologies, citing China as a national security threat. They're not our friend. And again, this is something I was saying back in the Bush administration when China had most favored nation status. I think they still do. What the heck? What are we doing? It's just like we're finally acknowledging them as the threat they are, because they've been acting like a threat. And yet, both Republican and Democrat administrations have bent over backwards recently. So the big issue here, what kind of vehicle technology are they talking about? Short-range communication to enable cars to sense nearby objects. So again, we're seeing this more and more in vehicles where they will alert you, the steering will take over and help you avoid hitting curbs, hitting other vehicles. It'll force you to slow down. These technologies are designed to promote safety. But again, the threat here is these technologies control vehicle movement and collect sensitive driver and passenger data as well. So again, do we trust? What is China doing with this information? They're up to no good. And again, the government is finally recognizing this and doing something about it. And with this information, not only can they use this for surveillance, as this can all be remotely controlled from China. In an extreme situation, a foreign adversary could shut down and take control of all their vehicles operating in the United States, creating crashes and blocking roads, causing huge, massive issues. Now, these have been raised for quite a while. Most of the people that have raised these have been laughed at and scorned. But now the Biden administration is agreeing with this and doing something about it, which I think is good. Again, part of the problem here is that they are, and this gets further into the article, gets more into the weeds talking about this. They're doing their best to undercut the same people producing this here in the United States. And it starts talking about LiDAR and, again, it mentions the ban of, or the tariff going from 25% to 100%. And this is going into effect in a week. Talking about this ban, though, I mean, there's so much information here. This is from hotair.com. The Biden administration, again, stepping up on China. So this is just announced. So not only the highest level of tariffs, 100% with Chinese EVs back in May. Now he wants to ban them. Today, it's not enough. Today, the administration is looking to effectively block the sale of all Chinese EVs. Just get rid of them, get them out of the market. And again, they have the same issue with cameras, microphones, GPS, and the issues that a foreign adversary could use with all this information could be a serious risk. But the bigger issue is, and this article focuses on how they're trying to help Harriswood, Michigan, but at the same time, I think Chinese EVs have the potential to upend the U.S. auto market, something that even Elon Musk has been warning about for quite some time. And I think it's great that the Biden administration is taking this seriously now. But why now? So I guess we should praise whenever good decisions are made or things that we can agree with. But this is the statement that China's cracked the code on budget-friendly, highly affordable EVs. While the U.S. and European manufacturers have struggled to come out with this, why these are highly subsidized. They're making most of these vehicles in Mexico or China with very cheap labor. And they have a range of sticker price around $10,000. Even with the 100% tariff, this would still sell for much cheaper than most domestic EVs. Again, this would devastate domestic manufacturers. Elon Musk said it would demolish the U.S. auto industry without trade barriers. So the European Union and the United States are both taking actions against China for flooding their markets and undercutting domestic production. This is trade. This is economic war that China is waging. So lately, the European Union has been going after this, and I think it's time that we take this seriously. Without all the subsidies, without the Chinese government behind this, if we were just competing head-to-head, Chinese EVs against the United States, it would be a very different story. That's not the case, and so I think it's great that we're actually tackling this. So again, there's been a lot of information that has been covered from unions to Chinese goods flooding the market, and you wonder why Stellantis is struggling. This is one of the big reasons why Stellantis and other major car manufacturers are struggling in the United States. So, yeah, it's a concern. So moving forward, we're going to jump to our topic of the day. And I don't know why this print here is small. So I'm not going to force people to try to read a tiny print here. And this is from Liberty Street Economics. And this really, I want to take a step back. This really talks about how we saved money through the pandemic. With all the money thrown at the economy, the trillions of dollars that were thrown at the economy, the overall premise of this article is that we actually had more cash and more spending, more money available to spend. And in most economies, people held on to that. They saved for a rainy day. And what did Americans do? They did what their government wanted them to do and went out and spent it. And again, this puts us right back in the same spot that we were in. So household saving in the U.S. soared during the pandemic. And then consumers cut back on spending while government policy supported incomes. However, the result of that is we've continued to spend. And now that all that government support is pulled away, U.S. savings rates are dropping below where it was before. Whereas that's not what happened in most countries. So free spending U.S. versus thrifty consumer foreign consumers. That's really the issue here. And as we were talking about yesterday with income tax versus a consumption tax, if we're taxing spending, you're probably going to get less spending, which doesn't help a retail economy, but it really helps a saving economy. And so we're going to watch some videos that talk about this and the importance of, how important it is to understand the difference between the two. But this is really what this is talking about, and raising a red flag that, hey, in the United States, we don't save. Now, a lot of people say, hey, savings can hurt you when you deal with the IRS. While that is true, if you're saving, our goal here at Guardian Tax Law is to make your taxes easy. And one of the best ways to make your taxes easy is to save. Prepare for a plan for the future and save so that when you do have issues that come up, you're prepared. You're ahead of the ball game, that you're making payments throughout the year. You're avoiding the penalties and interest. Because if you don't have something set aside, when you take a large chunk out of your 401k, if you don't pay the taxes on it, if you don't have this mentality that we need to save rather than spend, it's more likely, one, you're going to owe more taxes. Two, you're not going to be able to handle them when they come. So sometimes life just happens, and there are ways to, if you're retired or if you're injured, if you're disabled, there are ways to protect that income and assets from the IRS and even state taxing agencies. So what we're focusing on is wise economic decisions and habits, because saving is a habit that will help you and your family in the long run. So we've got some handy charts here. So the blue is our savings rate before the pandemic. And then 2021, we saved a lot of it because the government was giving us so much money. And then our savings rate since the pandemic, 22 to present, dropped down to 4%. And one of the big reasons for that, what have we had in the United States? Massive inflation. It makes it harder than ever to save. So everything that was saved during the pandemic is gone. When you look at the European, again, they had the similar rates. They saved more during the pandemic, same thing, but then their savings rate went up. The UK, much lower savings rates, but their post-COVID savings rates increased. Same with Japan, same with Canada. So this is the concern here. Whereas the United savings rates went down, most of the rest of the world had the opposite trend in advanced economies. And that is very concerning. So U.S. saving rate is down 2.5%, and elsewhere it's gone up. So then they take a bunch of different slices at this. How do we, how can we look at this different ways? Excess savings is a percent of disposable income. Foreign economies have continued to maintain around 14.6. United States, we've dropped since the highs of the pandemic. 22, 23, when we had the most inflation, our savings rate has absolutely plummeted. Not plummeted, but decreased by almost 5%. So that is a huge difference. So when they look at the average trend here, so they just plotted everything out. When you look at real consumption, so how much we actually spent, it dropped and then came back, and now consumption is higher than savings. Before, disposable income was pretty much the same, followed the same general trend. Sometimes it's above, sometimes it's below. When we hit the pandemic, savings, available income shot up, and people didn't purchase things. So again, they had the opposite effect. But as we use that income to buy things, again, in 21, another round of stimulus has shot up again. But as that money was spent, now real disposable income is much less than consumption, which is very concerning. And again, this is foreign income. With foreign incomes, their disposable income stayed above their consumption, dropped in 21 just like it did in the United States, and this consumption has come back up. But again, there's a gap there where their income is more than their consumption or their spending, and allows them to continue to save. So we're running out of time before our next break, but we have a couple videos that I want to share that really highlight the importance of savings, not only for individuals, but for the larger economy. And when you're dealing with taxes, again, we joke around that if we do our job right, we help people gain the tools to save, to pay their taxes timely, to plan, to avoid, and sometimes life just happens, you can't avoid it. And in those circumstances, there are options out there. Sometimes they're not great options, but there are options to help you deal with those. So I want to emphasize that I am encouraging people to save and plan for their future, invest for their future, and it can only help in the long run. And that's what we're trying to help people plan for. So we will be right back after this next break. Welcome back, everybody. I've got a YouTube video queued up, and this is from the Foundation for Economic Education. And hopefully this is educational. So here we go. And I'm not sure why
the truth.
Volume. Sorry about that.
About savings and consumption. We've all heard that consumption and spending grow the economy. Turns out that's wrong. In fact, the exact opposite is true. It's savings and production which make the economy grow, not consumption and spending. Here's a fact. Society wouldn't become wealthier if everyone just ran out and bought boats and houses and cars. If that were true, the larger everyone made their credit card debt, the wealthier we'd be. Something seemed fishy. Think about it this way. A healthy economy is made up of goods and services people want. If we want to understand why some economies have a lot of goods and others few, we have to ask just how does the amount of goods in an economy grow? In one word, production. Let's look at a family farm. How much food they produce depends on how much they work. When they work, their total amount of food increases. When they eat, their total amount of food shrinks. This consumption isn't a bad thing. It's really the whole point of working in the first place. But if they want to sustain themselves, their production must outpace their consumption. What if they decide to build a plow to help increase their productivity? With a plow, they could produce twice as much in half the time. Well, plows don't just pop out of thin air. It takes time to make them. And while it's being constructed, those workers won't be producing any food. They'll just be consuming it. That means they'll need to save enough food beforehand to eat while they work. Without those savings, there's no way for them to take time to build a plow. They'd run out of food. Once it's finished, they can produce more efficiently, and the total amount of goods will grow. On top of that, because they no longer have to worry about starving, time is freed up. They can now choose to produce other goods or services, or just relax and enjoy their free time. And this is what happens in the large-scale economy. Factories and bulldozers don't just pop out of thin air either. They have to be constructed with a pool of savings as well. Here's how it works. In a free market, when people save their money and don't spend it, capital piles up in banks. In turn, this money is lent to entrepreneurs who use it to purchase or create equipment, which expands their business and increases their level of production. And get this, the more goods that are being produced, the more savings that become available. As this pile of savings grows, even larger loans become available to even more entrepreneurs. This makes an economy grow exponentially. All of this is made possible only by savings. Without it, there wouldn't be any capital available to borrow, and economic expansion would come to a halt. An economy based on consumption and not production can only last until there are no more goods to consume. To learn more about sound economics, visit fee.org.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had it plugged in, so I couldn't hear it at first. I'm not sure if that's the best explanation. It's a little. It goes back to the basics with corn and food being produced. But basically, if we don't have people working, producing, what is our solution here in the United States? We import, which is why we have a huge trade imbalance. And so we import most of the goods that we consume. But if people are spending more than they can afford, or their savings are so little that they can't save up for emergencies, it impoverishes the average person. So that's the real downside here, is that and especially for the poorest in society, if they're relying on credit card debt, if they're relying on again home loans, burning up their savings, etc., living paycheck to paycheck, it's easy for those homes to fall into some severe financial ruin. And again, it's not good for economy. And the focus of our economy and of our politicians has been on consumption, retail spending. We need to keep Walmart going. We need to continue to buy stuff ad nauseum, where a lot of what we produce today isn't designed to last. It just isn't, which is unfortunate in my opinion. But I'm going to jump to the next video here. Again, it's going to look at it from a different perspective, but talking about why Americans are so bad at saving.
Why don't Americans save money? America, the wealthiest country in the world, loves to talk about our wealth formation, our wealth inequality, wealth taxes. But we don't spend a lot of time talking about that little word that makes wealth possible: saving. You build wealth not by spending every dollar you earn at that very moment, but by setting some aside and letting those savings accumulate. The average American household used to save about 12% of its income in the 1970s. Today we save just shy of 5%. Why do we find it so hard to put money aside? It comes down to math, psychology, and economics. The math is pretty simple. A lot of poor families simply don't make enough money to leave much behind. The bottom 40% of Americans save less than 1% of their income, while the top 1% saves more than half. It's clear, having a lot of money makes it easier to not spend it all at once. But even for Americans who aren't struggling to make ends meet, the psychology of saving is sort of tricky. We're bad at planning for retirement because we're bad at planning for everything in the distant future when there are so many concerns right now. We plan to go on diets and then cave to instant cravings. We plan to go to the gym and then choose to just take a nap. Spending money is satisfying right now. Saving money isn't satisfying for years. Psychology explains a lot, but psychology is universal, and people in other rich countries still manage to save much more than us. So why are Americans so uniquely bad at saving? The problem might be inequality. There's some evidence that the wealth gap encourages some low-income families to spend more on status items like jewelry and nice shoes instead of saving. It's harder to keep up with the Joneses when the Joneses always make us feel poor. How do we fix this? President Obama has endorsed an idea to make retirement plans opt out. This way, workers have to make a conscious decision to not save for retirement. This idea isn't new. Companies used to ask employees if they wanted to set aside money for retirement. Now, many of them just enroll us in 401k plans automatically. Americans can't be trusted to save, whether it's because of our paychecks, our brains, our national identity. We're addicted to spending all of the money that we take home. Programs that automatically withhold money from our paychecks save us more than just cash. They save us from ourselves.
So it's a very different take. The idea that we need to be saved from ourselves. I think what we need to do instead is to teach good financial habits, financial literacy. Because the problem with 401ks, again, this was put in, and I actually think that's a good idea to make 401ks opt out to encourage people to save, to stay for the retirements, etc. But it's not a cure-all, as we see that savings have gone down with that. Even after that, that happened 9 years ago, around 2015. One of the big problems is that our government rewards people spending money, and we punish making money and being productive with an income tax rather than punishing people for overspending with a consumption tax. And people still need to consume stuff. That just has to happen. However, it would make much more sense to encourage savings, to have policies in place. And one of the big issues here is how we bail people out, how we bail out the economy, how we print money discourages savings. So last article here that I want to touch on, and again, this is an article titled from Investopedia, How Savings Can Save the Economy. Not only for the macroeconomy, but for smaller individuals as well. So we're known for a lot of things. Saving isn't one of them. Again, between 2000 and 2020, and since then, the overall savings rate of savings amongst Americans has been trending downwards. So it in 2005 even turned negative for a while, which means we were just pulling money out of our savings. But one of the key things here, when the rate of personal savings is high, it allows people to recover from economic issues much faster. So not only will it help individuals weather tough times, but the overall economy, when personal savings are up, it gets rid of the bumps and the pain felt by economic ups and downs without the government going in and messing with things. So again, part of the problem with having depressed, artificially low interest rates since Bush, prior to 2008, they had quantitative easing. It sounded good at the time, but all they did was create the housing bubble of 2008. Obama continued that. Trump, the interest rate eked up, but not, enough to really stop the trend where we had free credit, cheap credit, and it was used instead of actually using savings. The problem with credit is it has to be paid back. Today we have SBA loans that are widely available, whereas before they were tightly controlled to make sure they would get paid back. People are getting all kinds of money and walking away from these loans whenever they can. So again, we've led to a prevalence of credit defaults, and again, the 2008 Great Recession is a great big example of that. So again, we have a preference for credit. While it helped fuel significant growth in the United States, it also came at significant cost. So impoverishing homes, creating higher debt that makes it harder for people not only to save, but to get ahead. And now that interest rates have gone up dramatically over the last couple of years, it's harder than ever to pay that back. So higher saving reserves. So how do we help people save? How does savings help consumers? It provides a cushion. So having a higher portion of income allocated to savings means that you can adjust their budgets when we have to spend more on an increased mortgage payment. Or if they lose their jobs, they have something to fall back during tough times. And as individuals are able to do that, they can avoid losing their homes. Again, it's one of the reasons we have such a huge homeless population, is the price of housing has gone through the roof for many other reasons. But if people can't save money and they can't put things away, it's going to, when times get tough, they end up on the streets. And that's very true today. But then it mentions the risk of savings. And this is one of the things I want to focus on, is how does our government work to punish savings? Economic stimulus packages. So it's additional sovereign debt, which again is done essentially by printing money. The more we print money, the more that savers are essentially forced to bail out non-savers. Just hurts. It hurts, and again, every time we do this, printing money leads directly to inflation. And what does inflation eat at more than anything else? Savings. So in 2023, when we had very high inflation, very few people, the only way to beat that is to be investing in the economy, and as the stock market hopefully keeps pace with inflation, that's the only way to stay ahead of it and keep your head above water. If you just have savings in the bank, savings in very conservative investments, which are most retirees, it hurts them more than anything else. So bottom line, a solid savings rate is one of the best cures for economic woes, personally and for the larger economy. And again, it also is a boon for our income investing, so people that want to invest and turn money around can do it. So again, this is kind of my little soapbox for the week. Americans have always been bad at savings, but we can turn that around. And when we sit down and we work with people and help eliminate that, we help give people, free up their ability to move forward with their lives. The key thing here is you can't just owe again. Avoiding this problem, setting good habits for you and your family, and for your financial future. The last thing you wanted to be doing is dealing with tax debt and having to pay tax debt through retirement. So instead of enjoying your life, you're sitting there in a trailer home or a mobile home park. Not that that's a bad way, but if, I know people that are paying lot rent, rent on a mobile or mortgage on a mobile home, and there are too many people, it's so sad, living on Social Security, struggling and can't afford to meet their bills. So let's avoid that. Let's get ahead of this and help people prepare for their financial independence, and also to make your taxes easy now and into the future. Thank you for watching.